Hi, this is Terry Pluto, sports columnist for the Plain Dealer. A few months ago, I asked readers to send in comments to me. What do the Browns mean to me? What have I learned from watching them all the years? I was in the paper only once, and more than 1,000 of you sent in emails. And several hundred are part of this book that's coming out now, What I've Learned from Watching the Browns. And here are a few of your stories.
The Browns are in our DNA. They've become family to many of us. The names and faces of the players change, but the brown and orange are always present. They're passed down from generation to generation like blue eyes and male pattern baldness. We just can't help our chemical predispositions.
When Art Modell took the Browns from us, I tried to explain to people it wasn't about football. For me, it was about family. As much as we all love football, it wasn't about that. It was about family. What he broke apart was family. Because in growing up in my family, a typical white bread, suburban Catholic family of 7 kids, the thing that kept us all together and the common bond that we always had, no matter how much we either hated each other that day or loved each other that day or had fun that day, it was about the Cleveland Browns. And every Sunday, that was the focal point after Mass.
My best day at Cleveland Browns Stadium was September 16th, 2007, the first game that my husband and I took our 2.5-year-old son Max to see. We had discussed for weeks whether he should attend the game only or give him the full experience and take him down to the Muni lot to tailgate. We decided that it must be all or nothing. We got up that morning and we dressed him in all of his Browns gear, and we even painted his hair to match the Browns helmet. On our walk into the lot, fellow fans were high-fiving him and cheering for him from the parking garages. He even ended up on the Channel 19 tailgate show. The smile on his face was matched only by the final score. Browns 51, Bengals 45. Fast forward to the 2009 season. After a particularly ugly loss, I was listening to my regular sports talk guys when frustration over the continued poor performance had gotten the best of me. As embarrassing as it sounds, I stood in my kitchen and I shed a few tears over the losses. Max caught me at this low moment and asked why I was so sad. I told him that I was sick of all the losing and I couldn't take it anymore. I looked down at him and I said there was still time for him to pick a new team, find a winner, give up on the Browns if you need to, because it was going to be a long life for him if this is how he was going to feel. He looked right up at me and he said, "Mom, the Browns are your team, so the Browns are my team too." The tears flowed again, but this time it wasn't because of the losing.
My first Browns game at Cleveland Stadium was in the early 1980s. My last game at Municipal Stadium was December 17th, 1995, the Browns' final game ever at the old beat-up, outdated, gray dungeon along Lake Erie. This was the place where 80,000 Browns faithful gathered 8 Sundays a year to show their support for our team that we lived and died for. This was the place where every restroom had 2 inches of urine along the floor, and you'd never hear a complaint from any of us fans. This was the place where when 1 o'clock rolled around, the fans had made their way from the tailgate parties in the Muni lot and brought their party around the mud field, which was painted green, to look like grass. This was the place where the dogs were let loose each and every Sunday. The place where blue-collar Clevelanders came together with white-collar Clevelanders, all races, all creeds, we all became one. We all wore our hearts on our sleeve to show our passion for our city, for our team, and even our beat-up old stadium. This was our football culture.
I was an 11-year-old at the old Municipal Stadium on January 4th, 1981. Need I say more? It was a brutally cold day on the lakefront. My father and I were unfortunate enough to have seats behind one of the steel columns that held up the overhang above the worst seats. We still managed to have a perfect view of the stadium's western end zone as Red Right 88 unfolded. I also remember clearly that was the day I first tasted whiskey. As we left the stadium, my father gave me a nip, presumably because I was freezing, but I'm fairly certain now that he simply couldn't justify anesthetizing himself while letting me suffer through the ache of that particular disappointment.
In the 1960s, during the Jim Brown era, all the games were nearly sold out. If you wanted a seat, you had to be prepared to stand in line. On one of the days where I needed a ticket, I was in line by Gate B, where I love to go because you could pick your seats out in those days, with nearly 300 or more fans. I stood there with my mother, who came along even though a few months earlier she had gone through major surgery. She wanted to see me why I continually bragged to her about the enthusiasm of the Browns fans. Mom was a Clevelander through and through, but didn't know the difference between a football or a baseball. As we got inside the door of Gate B, Mom felt faint and sick. I helped her sit on one of the steps. Then I heard a voice behind me politely saying, "Ma'am, can I help you?" I turned around and I couldn't believe my eyes. This polite man was Jim Brown. With my mouth wide open and in some sort of shock, I stood there and listened to the best player ever to run with a football say to my mom, "Can I get you some water? Or would you rather have me assist you up the steps, ma'am? You can sit on a chair and I will bring you the water." Mom decided to go up the steps with Jim. He had her sit there and got water for her. Every person on those steps knew who was supporting my mother. Everyone except my mother, who had no idea who Jim Brown was. I will never forget the kindness Jim Brown extended to my mom. Go Browns.
In 1980, I was 5 years old, and my parents had just gotten season tickets for the Browns. We had decided that summer that they were going to go to training camp. I was on a mission. I wanted to meet Lyle Alzado. Mom, she liked Brian Sipe. Dad actually wanted to go to the training camp. But when we got there, I kept waiting, and all the other players kept coming out, but there was no Lyle. So I decided, well, they're all coming out of the tunnel, so I'm gonna leave Mom and Dad. I didn't bother to tell them. And I was gonna go head to the tunnel and wait for him, which is what I did. I stood and waited at the tunnel, and then Lyle came out. I told him I wanted his autograph. He asked where my parents were. I said, well, they're in the crowd with all the other people. He asked if it was okay to take my hand. That way we could go find my parents. Of course it was. This was better than getting the autograph. So we finally found my parents. They brought me back. And they should have been pretty upset at me considering there were a lot of people there and I left them. But they let it slide since I came back with a player. He gave me the autograph too.
I think somebody from our family has been to just about every Browns home game since 1955 or 56. In fact, we got some behind-the-scene knowledge of the Browns back at Old League Park.
We were fortunate enough, our father was in the Army with Maury Kono, the original Browns equipment manager when the Browns started in 1946 in the All-American Conference. And we used to hang out on Saturday mornings, Saturday afternoons at Old League Park to watch the Browns practice and end up in the locker room and occasionally get lucky enough to walk out with a football or two.
I remember my favorite player was Ray Renfro. I don't know why I picked non-stars to be favorite players. And one day, it was one October, I was trick-or-treating at Halloween in our South Euclid neighborhood and ring the doorbell, and out comes Ray Renfro with a armload of candy. Had no idea he lived 2 streets away from us.
And after that, we decided we were all running post patterns and flag patterns trying to stay in bounds by the curb.
And for a lot of years, my 2 kids have, well, I've actually had to apologize to my 2 kids to bringing them up as Cleveland Browns fans because there's been a lot of heartache, but an awful lot of love involved too.
I get my son ready to go to football games, and he went to his first football game, and this first football game was against the Colts, and Peyton Manning and Tim Couch had a chance to win the game at the last second, and he threw an interception into the end zone, and my son started crying like a baby. He was about 5 years old and crying and looked up at me and said, "Daddy, why'd you do this to me?" And with all seriousness, I looked at him and I said, "Hey, my dad's dad did it to him, my dad did it to me, and I have no choice but to do it to you. It's a part of our fabric. We're Cleveland Browns fans. That's what it's all about."
Here we go, Brownies, here we go, hoo, hoo.
Here we go, Brownies, here we go, hoo, hoo.
Here we go, Brownies, here we go, hoo, hoo.
Here we go, Brownies, here we go, woo, woo. Here we go, Brownies.